Hello and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. I've taken a couple of weeks off to just kind of go on holiday and relax a little bit, which was great. I hope maybe you did the same, maybe you didn't. Maybe you've had a nice couple of weeks anyway. I don't know what you've been doing, but regardless, I hope you've had a nice couple of weeks. And it's interesting because I was looking around, kind of keeping an eye on what's been going on in the news and seeing what's happening and putting together the sort of notes for this show. And it's also the time when Microsoft go on holiday quite a lot. So actually the pace of news has slowed right down. And that's quite good because I haven't done one of these for a couple of weeks, but actually there's around about the same amount of stuff to talk about. So this might be a problem for next week, but for right now, actually it works quite well. There's a couple of things to talk about around Copilot, and then there's some Microsoft Graph changes, and we're going to finish off with some Azure Communication Services stuff. I have having that time off, having that kind of 2-week break, has given me some time to think about this kind of this channel, these updates, where I think the most value can be gained. And so I'm going to be making some little tweaks as we go along. Nothing major. The cadence is going to continue. I'm going to keep doing them weekly, but just sort of, the content might shift ever so slightly, just to reflect really how Microsoft are thinking about Microsoft 365, how they're thinking about developers and development. But I can get into all of that kind of as I think about it some more, and as I kind of concrete some of those views, because at the moment they're still floating around in my head a little bit, and I just need to kind of figure them out. I'm also going to make more of an attempt to look at the live stream conversations. It's something I'm not very good at. I always tend to ignore the live stream until, it's a habit I need to kind of form, is to try to check the comments as I go through. Some of that is setup related, and it's kind of due to the fact that I have to go and look all the way over here in order to see the comments. That's not great. That's something I am working on. It's a bit of a process, so bear with me, but we'll get there in the end, I'm sure. All right, less waffling from me, and let's get into some of the content. So the first thing I want to talk about is Microsoft 365 Copilot and message extensions in Microsoft Teams. Now, I've said this before, but you might have missed it. This announcement came as part of the Microsoft 365 Copilot announcement, where Microsoft said that for developers who have got Microsoft Teams messaging extensions, those messaging extensions will be able to function as plugins in Copilot, which is kind of a good idea. It's kind of exciting because you will be able to write plugins for Copilot. The idea there is that almost a bit like, I suppose, smart, like I don't want to say her name. Those Lady in a Tube, and there's an Apple equivalent and there's a Google equivalent that you talk to. They have skills, and invoking them with particular keywords passes control to that skill to do stuff. It's going to be a similar kind of thing with Copilot. If Copilot figures out that the thing you're trying to ask for is best delivered by that add-in, it will pass control over to that add-in. And as a developer, you'll be able to make those plugins yourself. But what Microsoft are also leveraging is the fact that in messaging extensions, you've already got this kind of plugin model. So they're going to kind of take that and say, well, actually, if you've got an extension, messaging extension, you'll be able to leverage it as a plugin for Copilot, which is interesting. And that kind of happened as part of the announcement. I picked up on it and talked about it. And then we haven't really had anything since then, and none of this stuff is like, you can't use any of this stuff yet. It's all coming. It's all to be developed. But there's an interesting blog post from the Microsoft developer blog, which I will show you because it's kind of interesting. I don't think it adds any more information than what we already know, to be honest. But it is kind of interesting anyway, because it kind of goes over some of that groundwork again. So let me just show you this. So this is the blog post. It's around keeping your app top of mind. It's about why you should use messaging extensions. There's a nice little graphic, and we've talked about messaging extensions a lot. I've talked about them previously as kind of like a kind of hidden superpower for your application, really, because for me they really encapsulate the value of the development platform for Microsoft Teams. Yeah, apps are great, where you go to a specific app and you launch it inside Microsoft Teams. But really, you might as you're not that far away really from just having the app as a separate application and kind of just switching to it as a window. Messaging extensions, I think, are different. So these are the things where you're composing a message and then there's a little 3 dots, and then your app can be in there. And so you can bring in content from your application and put it into the Compose box, or you can look up information and pop it into the Compose box there, which is interesting. And for me, that kind of really, that's the value really of integrating applications with Microsoft Teams, where you can very quickly go and talk to those applications without leaving Microsoft Teams, and then bring that like the right information from that application back into Teams. Okay, so so the interesting thing here, so it goes through messaging extensions, what you can do, how you can use them. I've done lots of blogs and videos in the past about these, and how you can build them. So you can go and look through kind of my channel for like do some searching, and I might do like a roundup blog post of all the previous stuff I've done around building extensions. There's some code samples there and stuff as well. I think what's interesting is this bit at the end where they're kind of saying that actually, if you do build messaging extensions, not only should you build them today because it's actually a good idea, like it's a good thing for a Teams application to have, but also they are kind of reiterating the fact that these will serve as plugins for Microsoft 365 Copilot. It's good to see this written down again. It kind of means that Microsoft are very serious about doing this. Sometimes you get a whole bunch of announcements and then like we fixate on a particular thing that got mentioned. I mean, that thing might be a feature that is coming like in 5 years' time that may or may not happen, but actually we fixate on it because it's the one thing that we really care about. I was a bit worried that this might happen with this, but actually seeing it written down again and again feels like it's something that definitely is going to be there kind of day one. So I think that's really good. It's good to see that you've got this stuff where you can start building stuff today, basically. A lot of people ask me, what can I do right now to get ready for Microsoft 365 Copilot? Some of that is organizational side. So, what can organizations do to get ready for Microsoft 365 Copilot? And I'm going to address that in a blog post coming soon. But also, what can developers do? What can developers do to get ready for Copilot now? Building messaging extension is one of those things. You could build a ChatGPT plugin right now. But actually, it's probably more straightforward if you're already in the space to build a messaging extension if you haven't already. So, interesting blog post, worth a read through just to understand that relationship between messaging extensions and 365 Copilot. Okay, let's go talk about something else. Let's talk about some changes to Graph. And there's 2 different changes to Graph I want to call out. May affect you, may not. So the first one is around pronouns, and I actually didn't realize you could do this, but using Microsoft Graph, it is possible to turn on and off the ability for people in the organization to see different pronouns. Pronouns is a feature that got added to Microsoft 365 relatively recently to allow users to specify their preferred pronouns. Now, there is already a Microsoft Graph URL endpoint for admins to control this setting, basically to read and to read and set that property, and then so that's happened. That's there already, and so it is entirely possible that admins have already built this into PowerShell scripts or into provisioning scripts for different environments and stuff like that. There is a change to this that is happening, and it's already happened. So this was not a warning this is happening. This is a, hey, we've already made the change. Here's the announcement. And that's going to change to a new path. So let me just do this so you can see what I'm seeing. Okay. This is all on the beta endpoint. So this is why this stuff is allowed to change. This is your reminder, actually, that the beta endpoint changes frequently and without warning. So this is not the V1 production stuff. This is the beta endpoint. And just to highlight that Microsoft don't have to give you a warning when they change and break stuff in beta. So this is a post from the 5th of July. And this change starts July. So there is no warning on this, but it's on the beta endpoint. It will be a breaking change because this URL is changing from /beta/organization, your ID, /settings pronouns, just to beta admin people pronouns, which makes more sense. It's cleaner. But if you've got PowerShell or you've got other code that relies and has this URL hard coded, it's going to start breaking. Also, this scope has changed, so you are going to possibly have to go through another set of admin permission getting. because it's a different scope as well. So this only affects you. This, by the way, this doesn't affect you if you're using pronouns today in your organization, but you're not programmatically enabling or disabling them. This is only really for people who are programmatically setting those that pronoun setting. And if you've got that in some kind of code and it's started breaking, then this might be why. So that is worth having a look at. All right, let's talk about something else that's breaking. Again, something else on the beta endpoint. And this is kind of a small thing, but it's going to impact you a lot if you use it. So the Microsoft Graph API has a way to list channels, Microsoft Teams channels. It's had that for quite a long time. Either all channels or just getting channels by particular filter settings or whatever. And that's been there for really quite a long time now. And there's a few changes. This is just in beta. The change really that is most impactful is that the moderation settings property. So when you get back information about a channel, one of the things that you'll get back is a moderation settings property, which tells you all about the moderation settings of that channel, which makes sense. By default today, that gets returned. So you don't have to ask for it. It gets returned in the kind of regular payload of information. The thing that is changing is that isn't going to get returned by default anymore. You can still get it, but you'll have to use the like the $select query to specifically or explicitly request it. So it's not going to be returned. So this will impact you if you use the list channels API endpoint, you get back a list of channels, and then you go and read the moderation settings, because you probably are not using the select query to ask for the moderation settings because they get returned by default. That is now not going to be the case. There's no timeline on this. So I imagine it's yes, there is. I'm sorry. August the 7th. So it's not happening for a couple of weeks, but it is happening quite soon. Yeah. So August the 7th is when that change goes into effect. So you've got a couple of weeks before that happens. You could make this change now because you could put the select in now and it would carry on working anyway, even though it's returned by default, and then you're ready for when that changes. So that's worth making now. And again, try to kind of remember if stuff starts breaking after August the 7th because you're expecting there to be a moderation settings property and it isn't there anymore, it's probably this. So kind of try and remember to come back to this and remind yourself or remind your dev team that that's what's happened. All right, one last thing to tell you about, because I feel like I've been talking for a while, and just a roundup blog post from the Azure Communication Services team. They do this helpful monthly roundup of all the things that have happened recently. And this one is a roundup of really things that got released in June, actually. So we're kind of late to the party, but because I've been away, I missed it. But it's still a kind of useful one. There'll be another one along soon for July's updates. But you can see all the things. And again, this really kind of underlines how the Azure Communication Services team is building out this whole platform, and it's becoming a whole thing. There's quite a lot of stuff that's previously been announced that's going GA, all of call automation APIs, all the call recording APIs. That's brilliant. That's very interesting to see all that stuff go GA. Direct routing is now GA, both inbound and outbound. That's really interesting as well. You can bring your own carrier, bring your own number. Virtual rooms, which I've talked about before. That's also GA. So basically, it's a whole bunch of interesting things that we've been talking about over the past year or so that have made it into GA, means that they're supported, means that they can be used in production. Very cool. There's some new 3x3 video support stuff in the WebJS SDK. That's cool. That's public preview. That's going to be interesting. And then there's some other stuff as well around PSTN, cross-country stuff. So if that sounds interesting to you, this blog post is worth a read. These roundups are always really useful because for many people, Azure Communication Services is one of the things they have to keep up to date with, along with Microsoft Graph, Microsoft 365, Teams, SharePoint, whatever else it is. Especially if you're a developer, because you've also got to keep up with your language, the IDE, the SDKs. There's a lot to keep up with. So these monthly roundups are super useful. Okay, that's everything from me that I want to talk about this week. I hope you have a good week, and I will talk to you again next time.